Hi, good afternoon. My name is Charlene Onolino, and I'm with Outreach Consulting Services. I'm here today to present on SSI and SSDI. And actually, before I go into the actual presentation, I want to just give you a little background on myself. My father was actually in the Navy for 34 years as a retired E9 Master Chief, and my son was in the United States Marine Corps. So those who are in the military and or are veterans are very close to my heart. So I like to be able to present this information to all of the bases. So I know that there may be some questions, and we'll ask that you hold off on the questions till the end of the presentation. So if you, my information is obviously on the screen, Charlene, and then you can also email me as well if you have additional questions. So what I'd like to do is explain to you the differences between SSI, SSDI, and SDI. And SDI only applies in the state of California. So if you're in a different state, that last benefit will not apply to you. So I also teach this at San Diego State University and obviously all over the county of San Diego. But the master's program actually encouraged me to present this as like a bowl of fruit, because Social Security benefits are very difficult to understand and can be overwhelming. So I want to have you use the analogy of fruit, because you know, you have apples, oranges, bananas. They all look and taste different, like the benefits, but they're still fruit. So they're still within the Social Security Administration. So I'm going to go ahead and start with SSI. SSI is Supplemental Security Income. Now, in order to qualify for this benefit, you must be a U.S. citizen or a resident. You cannot leave this country for more than 30 days, and you have to either be over the age of 65 or disabled. That's what the qualifier for SSI is. So our next slide. So SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. Now, this is a benefit that is provided by our federal government that says, again, like I mentioned earlier, you either have to be over the age of 65 with limited income or disabled. And they determine what disabled is. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Today, the maximum amount a person could receive for SSI is $910 a month. Now, this only provides for food and housing. That's it. Nothing additional. That is such a low amount that Social Security allows a person who's receiving this benefit to also work. And that means 20 hours a week or less, or about $800 a month or less. Because if you start making more than that, then they will determine that you don't need the benefit. And I'm going to go into another slide which will show you how that all kind of works out on working and receiving SSI benefits. You can also own one home and one car and receive that. So this is actually, and all of the information that I provide to you is straight from the Social Security website. So this is actually determining if you're single, if you're married, and receiving SSI benefits. So our next slide. Okay, so every state has the option of giving the recipient of SSI the amount dictated for food, whether it be a check or debit card. Across the board, everybody receives, in all 50 states, $750 for the housing, right? And then the food, which is the 160.72, can be determined by that individual state. California gives a check. Arizona may issue the food portion in a debit card. So each state can determine how they're going to provide the recipient the 160.72. So that's how some people go, oh, I get 2 checks. Well, this is the reason why. 750 is from the feds, the food portion is from the state, even though it says Social Security. That's how that's broken down. Next slide. Okay, remember I had just mentioned in the previous slide about working. Now, I always use the example of $800 because again, if you go over that amount, then you could potentially lose your SSI benefit. Now, the first $65, they do not count. It's called earned income exclusion. So that would leave you $715 left from the $800. Well, Social Security divides that by 2, and that is countable income. So $357.50 is considered countable income. Now, they take that and they subtract it from your $910 of SSI. You end up with $553.22. Well, they look at the 800 of the gross, they look at the 553, and that's about the total income, that 1353, that you would receive total, working part-time and receiving your benefit. So that's how the calculation is done for working and receiving. Now, what is SSDI? SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance. Everyone who pays into this, or everyone that works, is paying into SSDI. Now, I always have to ask this question when I'm presenting at the bases. When you all get your stubs, is there FICA taxes taken out? Do you recall? Is FICA taken out? Because then that's where Social Security Disability Insurance comes in. Now, if you become disabled and have been working consistently for the last 5 out of 10 years, you would be able to qualify for this. And it is your own money, so everybody would be different. It depends on how much you paid and what your tax bracket was, your number of exemptions. So, does everybody recall they used to receive their Social Security statements in the mail? They're green and white, and it would say if you become disabled, you would receive X amount, or if you retire at this age, you're going to receive X amount of money. Okay, so your SSDI withdrawal, or what they've taken out, will determine what that is. In order to receive that, you have to have worked 5 full-time years out of the last 10. This is where people get really confused. I always have clients say to me, I've worked for 30 years and then had an accident or a diagnosis, and then they say, well, I worked 6 months and then I took 6 months off. And then I came back and I worked 2 months and I took 3 months off. And then I worked part-time and then I took another 6 months off. Well, now we're doing a look-back period. And now you don't have 5 full years. Doesn't have to be consecutive, but 5 full years of full-time employment. Because you're doing part-time, you're taking time off, and this is where people get in trouble, and they end up, even though they paid into it all these years, they don't qualify. Now, if you do happen to qualify, you will get the amount that you've paid into it. They'll determine what that amount is each month. And after you've been disabled for 2 years, you would then qualify for Medicare. Okay? So, and in the state of California, you would, if you depending on how much that money, that amount was, you could also qualify for Medi-Cal. But typically, people who receive SSDI benefits are receiving $1,000 or more, just because they paid into it for long periods of time. So that's SSDI. Now, they're based on your work credits. So we can actually go to the next slide, and that shows how Social Security, now this is based on age. So whatever your age is, this is the number of credits you would need in order to qualify for your SSDI benefit. And this is all determined by Social Security in number of years worked. Okay, our next slide. Now, what's key to those who pay into Social Security disability insurance, if they have a child that's disabled, your child that has a disability, if you never become disabled yourself, your child would qualify for this benefit. They have to have been diagnosed under the age of 22, and they would be able to receive the benefit if you either become disabled, pass away, or retire. I'm not talking about military retirement. I'm talking about Social Security retirement. A lot of folks go, oh, I'm at retirement and I'm retiring at 45. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about Social Security retirement. Now, your child would be able to receive the benefit. Our next slide will show they would calculate it at 75% of what you would receive, you yourself. So again, remember I was talking about that statement, right, that you would receive? You would look at that statement and you would be able to calculate based on the estimate of what they would have given you, what your child would receive. Now again, I say child, it's once the child has been diagnosed under the age of 22, and more than likely they're going to be over the age of 22 in order to qualify, unless it's by a parent passing. But what would happen is that child would first get Social Security benefits for the death of a parent, number one, and then later could get and receive the SSDI benefits. Do you see where they're different pots, right? We're talking about Social Security, but there are multiple pots, okay? So this is very key to parents who have a child with disabilities. I always want them to remember that your child would be entitled to your SSDI benefit. Okay, so remember the statement that I had mentioned. Typically, you don't receive that anymore because the federal government's trying to save money and not burn down trees, right? So, some people say they have received them. I received it last year, and then I hadn't received it for like 5 years. So, it's like hit and miss. It's like rolling dice when you're going to get this. But, next slide, I would encourage you to go to the Social Security website. Now, this is ssa.gov. When you get to the first page of the website, you're going to click on the icon that you can see right up here that says My Social Security. Now, you click on that icon, you enter in your name, your Social Security number, and they're going to ask you specific questions that only apply to you so that they know they have the right person. And the way they do this is they will say, you purchased a car 20 years ago, and they'll give 15 different banks. Well, obviously you did it through the credit union, and it wasn't Bank of Wisconsin, right? So only you would know those answers. And so through that entire process, they're asking you various questions. At the end, they're going to give you all of your numbers from that Social Security statement. And you can log in at any time. So I would encourage everyone to do that. I would encourage your spouses or partners or family members to do that as well, so you all know what you would receive in the event you need to file for Social Security disability insurance, or you want to know what your retirement age is, and so on and so forth. Okay. Again, This only applies for folks who are living and working in the state of California. Now, keep in mind, those of you who've, what is that called when you start when you sign up to join the military? What's that called again? Whatever your state you were at when you...
Home of record?
Home of record. Okay. So again, if you have a different state other than California for your home of record, this is not going to apply to you. But if your spouse or someone in your household is living with you, living in California, they are working, they are receiving, well, they are paying into state disability insurance. Okay, so I'm just going to go over it briefly just in case. So this is state disability insurance. And this is only for the state of California. Next slide. Now, in order to receive this, you have to have at least worked and paid into state disability by $300. This is where it gets tricky for people. And I've had so many people say, hey, I've applied and I got denied, but I've been working for 5 years. They have 49 days from the date they become disabled to file a claim with the state of California. A lot of smaller employers or some employers don't notify the employee that they can apply for state disability insurance. Now, in order to do this, all they need to do is go to the EDD website, and EDD stands for Employment Development Department, and that's in the state of California. Now, that would be edd.ca.gov. And all they do is they get to the first page, and they click on disability, and then they just answer all the questions to file a disability claim. So that's SDI. I know that I gave you a lot of information in a very short amount of time. But what I've also done was I've created this chart so that you can look at these different disability benefits and determine, which one I was talking about. So I went through and I showed SSI, SSDI, and SDI, what the program was, does that receive health insurance, and so on and so forth, so that you have an opportunity to look at the information and say, oh, which one was she talking about? I forgot. You could always reference back to this slide. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at the filing process, which is a little bit of a challenge and a nightmare, and can be. So I want to explain to you this process. In order to file for disability benefits, SSI or SSDI, it's a 25-page application. Now, if we're talking about filing benefits for a child, it's typically only 12 pages. And Social Security gives you an application that's specific to the child's diagnosis, okay? And it's typically really an easy process for a child to be qualified, okay? Not so much for the adults, but for the child. Now, even though the SSI, and it's SSI, SSDI, it's the same application for both. You have a 25-page application, you have a 15-page adult functioning report, and then there's a 1-page authorization form. So technically you're filling out 41 pages for an adult. For children, it's 12. Okay, now let's see, once you submit the application, we'll go to the next slide. Once you submit the paperwork, it's 4 to 6 months before you hear back. Typically, 70% of the people who file are denied. Even with diagnoses, I've seen people denied. If you have what they call a presumptive, and there's probably about 160 on their website, a presumptive disability would be, say, Down syndrome. That's presumptive. That means they accept that, and there's no denial on someone who was born with Down syndrome. If you have a terminal cancer, you're obviously terminal and going to pass away, you would be approved immediately. But other diagnoses, it's not a slam dunk. Now, 70% of the people are denied. You have 60 days to file the appeal. This is so critical because if you are approved a year later, they're going to pay you back pay. So it's important, if a doctor has diagnosed you or your child with a disability, to continue the process. All the appeal is, I always have families, in a panic call me, oh my gosh, I got denied, we applied. All it is you are stating that you do not agree with their decision. And the reason why, in supportive documents, okay? So, once you have submitted that appeal, next slide, it's 6 to 8 months before you hear back. Yes, it's a very long process, can be. 89% of these folks are denied. But again, you have 60 days to file the appeal. You must file that appeal within the 60 days in order to keep your claim active. Now, once you submit that appeal, it takes 12 to 14 months. And the next step will be you will go before the administrative law judge. Now, this is in all 50 states, right? Because it's federal, so it's everywhere. So for you families who are in the military and you start your claim here and say you end up getting transferred to another location, all you need to do is to go to Social Security, say you start the claim, because I've had families who, I had the CO of Stennis, and I was helping his family and his daughter, so they filed for her here, but then he got transferred to Virginia. So all I suggested and recommended that they do was, when they got to Virginia, go to their nearest Social Security office and let them know they started the process in California and now they live here. So that all communication, they'll have the correct address, and they'll still get the correct communication regarding the benefit and the claim. Okay? So, now, once they get before the administrative law judge, only 50% end up receiving that benefit. Now, I always, the folks and families that I help and have helped throughout the year, if they listen to what I'm saying and go by the guidance they're given, usually they don't have to go to that next step, which is in front of the administrative law judge. If you happen to have to go that route, I always suggest that they get a Social Security attorney, because that Social Security attorney can then access all medical documents. All they need to do is write the letter, send it out to the doctors or hospitals, they get the information back. I would never recommend a client or a family to go in front of an administrative law judge by themselves. They don't know the law, and they don't know what documentations that are needed. So if they happen to get to that place of going before the judge, I absolutely recommend a Social Security attorney. Now, after once they've gone and been awarded the benefit, then if it was an SSDI case, remember that's your own money, you paid into it. They will give you a lump sum. I've seen people receive a $40,000 check. Yeah, because it was, say, 2.5 years. It took them to receive their benefit. But again, that was their money. They paid into it through their FICA taxes. Now, if we're talking about SSI benefit, it's at the time that they're awarded the benefit, they will receive, say that they were going to receive $20,000. At the time of award, they'll get $2,500. 6 months later, they'll receive the other $2,500. And then 6 months after that, they'll receive the remaining balance, which is $15,000, if it were a $20,000 award. But SSDI, it's your own money, and they will give that to you immediately. So that's why it's so important, if you're going through the process, not to give up, to continue through the process and file the appeals. Or again, if you have to go before a judge, then pull a Social Security attorney into the process. Now, a lot of times our families do have a child with a disability and are in special ed programs, have an IEP, and won't be able to make medical, financial, or legal decisions once they turn 18. I recommend to parents, if that's the case with your child about to become an adult, you start the conservatorship. Now this is for every state. And basically a judge will give you authorization to make legal and financial and medical decisions for your adult child with disabilities. And I know it's an oxymoron, but that when we're talking about a disability, it is essentially sometimes they are adult children. So I just give some information about that. And as a matter of fact, when I was at Miramar, I had a gentleman who was in one of my other classes, and he told me that he started the conservatorship process here in San Diego. He did exactly what I said, and they ended up, they were waiting for the judge to give them the documents of the conservatorship. So, again, I have those documents if you're going to do that here in San Diego. And again, like I said, if you're moving to a different state or you're in another state, please go to your local Superior Court or Family Court, and I'm sure that they have all of that for conservatorship as well. Now, if you have a child with special needs, I always recommend to parents to get a special needs trust. Because what happens is, and I'm going to give you an example. I was presenting at the Autism Society of San Diego, and this couple came up to me. They were probably in their mid-60s, and they said, our 90-year-old mother passed away, and my 57-year-old brother had been living with her all of her life, and left him a substantial amount of money, probably close to $1 million. He was on Social Security. So I said, well, does he have a special needs trust? And she said, no, because we were listening to you through your presentation. I said, well, you better go to an attorney tomorrow, get that special needs trust, get that money moved into the special needs trust, because your brother is going to lose his SSI benefit. Because you can only have one home, one car, and $2,000 in financial assets. So, my encouragement for those of you with children with special needs, because your parents, their grandparents, loved ones could leave your child money. And if your child is receiving SSI, they're going to lose it. And a special needs trust protects this money so that they can receive that within the trust. And it's written specifically for children with disabilities. Now there's another thing that I haven't put in my presentations, and I plan on doing that, and I completely forgot, but I also want to let you parents and families and folks know about the ABLE account. This was passed a few years ago, and it's all 50 states. Now, an ABLE account is an account that the federal government has said you can put in $14,000 a year, it's capped at $100,000. And if your adult child is living in an apartment where it's $900, well, of course that would take up all of their Social Security money. They could pull money out of that ABLE account to buy food and necessary things and it won't be a penalty. Remember I said 2,000 in assets? Okay, well, the ABLE account protects them from that. And so I encourage all of you, each state has those who administer. Here in California, they call it CalABLE. But I've had families who live here in California, but have reached out to different states. You are not mandated to reach within your own state to start a CalABLE. You can start it with any state that you want. So, number one, I would ask you to Google the ABLE account, right? And it would take you to our federal government's website on ABLE so that you can read up on that, and Google ABLE for your own particular state too, so you understand how to protect even more money for your children.